Hello, this is part 5 of my building of the Proteus project. This is using the Mobius 1 32nd scale kit. This has been quite a project if you've seen any of the previous videos. Anyway, we're on the home stretch. If it was in the movie, it would probably be just getting ready to come out of the ear in the timeline of it all. But anyway, yeah, I thought, based on the last video, I'd be jumping right into the characters at this point. But in order to do the figures, I needed to make sure I could pose them correctly inside the ship. So to do that, I needed to put the rest of the girder work in there. Now in the movie, there's two sort of very prominent girders that come from the map desk, and then support the upper level of all the windows at the front. And in the Mobius kit, those girders do not do that. They basically go from the desk just up to the ceiling. They don't reach out forward. These are very prominent in the film, and it's again, for posing the characters, it's something they can kind of grab onto or duck underneath or whatever. So anyway, I looked at the parts they had and wondered if I could maybe cut them down or maybe cast a piece of them and reproduce them, but nothing really seemed viable. So what I had to do was I had to figure out what the correct shape was. I mean, I could see what it was meant to look like in the film, and I knew the different points it had to start from and attach to. So I made a couple of really sort of basic templates, one out of balsa wood, just so I could cut it really easily and work it to shape. And basically I just sort of kept test fitting that in place of where it would be. This was complicated a bit more by the way the kit is engineered, which is actually quite nice, but it has an inner framework for the windows. Then you put the glass on top of that, and then you put the top hull on top of that. So it's kind of the glass is sandwiched in between. That gives you a proper interior. But that meant I had to sort of have that inner frame in place to know exactly how far forward and what angle these girders had to go to reach it. So I dare say there's mathematical ways of doing this, but that's beyond me. So I was built. So I built a little sort of template out of balsa wood and just kept trimming it and cutting it. And if that didn't work, then I'd quickly make another one just to kind of get that basic template of what the shapes and angles needed to be for everything to touch. And then I basically scanned that in, took that into Photoshop, made the correct shape with the cutouts and everything else in there. Then using a device called a Cricut, which my wife has, you're able to sort of print out on very thin plastic or paper or vinyl stickers or whatever. So that's what I did. I basically made a sheet of about 8 of these things, because there's a limit to how thick it can cut through. So I thought if I use thin plastic card and then put those together, it would give me the thickness and the strength that I need. So I did that, so printed those out, cut out all the little holes, or rather just press them out. The Cricut cuts them. You can then just sort of push them out, and they go out pretty cleanly. Stuck those together, and then I got some 2mm plastic strip, and then, one at a time sort of glued that along the perimeter of the girder to match what you see on the real ship. And then I glued a couple of tiny little pieces of sort of half round, I think 1mm strip, just to sort of indicate where they're kind of all sort of bolted together. It's not 100% accurate. They're actually a little chunky, but as you can see, once they're sort of in place, it really is. It makes all the difference, and you're like, oh, that's the Proteus. And even when you're looking at it through the windows, it looks right, and it is a kind of a big part of the interior, and that is a big part of the ship. So I really wanted to make sure I got them in there and representing what they really look like. So that was a big project, unexpected. But then I thought, all right, now I can get onto the figures. I'm on the home straight. So I used a combination of some old 132nd scale Airfix British Army figures and some Tamiya 135th, I think US Army, and sort of the Airfix ones were good because they already came sort of intended to be posed in multiple ways. So anyway, I just used different arms and legs and sawed off feet, and just tried to make each character look in their pose as much like the counterparts of the Dr. Duval characters kind of leaning on the sill up at the front. Grant is sort of standing back a little more, from the front. Michael's is sort of busy. He'll be sort of hunched over the light table. Obviously, Captain Owens is easy. He just sits up sits up top in his control chair. And then Cora, I sort of wanted to make sure she was there as well. I didn't want to have her in the back room, even though that's where she spent a lot of the time in the film. And that, of course, was a bit of a challenge because I got to make a 1/32nd scale Raquel Welch. So, and there's no real 1/32nd scale military figures that are not encumbered with, a lot of the, military uniform. The soldiers I had sort of had, their sort of tunics or whatever, and their shirts and trousers were pretty good. They matched a pretty good fit of the coveralls that the guys wear. I did want to put Cora in the wetsuit, the famous wetsuit, not entirely accurate to any moment in the film, but I think it's just part of a representation of this ship and the movie is Raquel Welch in the famous, white wetsuit. So I found, actually was at the Scale Model World, the Telford IPMS show, which I have been going to every year for the last couple of years. And I thought, all right, if I can't find 1/32nd scale female figures here, where would I be able to find them? And I thought I might be able to get some sort of, racing car pit crew or something like that, but they're all sort of 24th. But I did actually manage to get these 1/32nd scale, basically naked, female. You can get males as well, but, my army guys were working out. And they kind of come in lots of different parts and different configurations. You can kind of pose them pretty well any way you want, and because they're naked, I thought, okay, well, that'll represent a skin tight wetsuit pretty well with some modifications. So anyway, so that's sort of what I used as a starting point. Figured out a pose that worked. I still had to sort of break the elbows and the wrists just to kind of get a bit more of a likeness in the posing. Glued that together, and for those people who are not familiar, I mean, Raquel Welch was an absolute bombshell by every definition, and her statistics are slightly more curvaceous than these figures. So I did delicately with some Humbrol filler and bits and pieces, make this character a little more Cora-like. And none of the characters actually had the right hair. They either all had their hair down, and so I sort of took one of them that was pretty close, and then cut off some of the hair that was going down to the shoulders, and sort of put a bun up on top, and kind of went at it from there. So that was kind of a little project. I wish it looked better than it does, but I think it's a good representation, again, with all of the characters in there and sort of standing sort of where they would stand and stuff. And I've built a little backpack for the diving suit, which I'll probably put on one of the tables, just to give it a bit of a, so it's like a miniature sort of diorama just inside inside the cabin. But I think it's worth it. I think it's going to look pretty good. So those were the figures finally. And again, once I had the proper girders and everything in there, I realized I could make sure I put them in the right position. The other thing I've done, I made some masks for the rubber seals around the windows, and I've read that you can get these as aftermarket kits, which look fantastic. But again, I thought I'd give this a go myself, using my wife's Cricut. So I had some black vinyl. I basically did a rubbing. I used a soft pencil and a piece of paper and did a rubbing over that framework piece, so I could get the exact shapes of all the windows and pretty much where they are in relation to each other. It wasn't exact, but that didn't matter, because what I was going to do was just cut out each surround separately. So I made an image in Photoshop of all the window surrounds, and again printed it out on the Cricut on black vinyl, and it popped out pretty easily, and it's tacky enough that you could sort of just stick it down and peel it back up until you get it in the right place. And again, because it has to look like it has to be even around the edges of the frame, I just tacked in place, I sellotaped in place that internal framework so that I could see where that was in relation to the sort of the rubber, simulated rubber trim. I think it looks good. I'll obviously have to, once everything starts getting glued in place and I glue the frame on and then I put the hull on, test fitting that with everything in exactly the right place, I'll see, and I may have to peel a couple off and move them, but I think it looks good. I think it looks correct. There's a couple of rings on the surface on the bow, just under the front two windows. You see them in some of the close-ups. They're not really prominent, but again, reasonably so. So I just made those out of plastic card again, using the Cricut. It was Cricut time, because it just punches them out. It just punches out the exterior and the interior, and then you just pop it out. And I sort of glued those in place. And then sanded them sort of as flat as I could get them, but still have them show up. So again, a little detail missed off by Mobius. So then I've been sanding the hulls and painting it. I had got a coat of white on this at one point. I'd used Humbra white, but it's a little yellow. And given how sort of it's surgically clean, how pristine the ship is, I wanted a kind of a bluer white. Someone recommended Tamiya pure white, so I'm going to try that. But anyway, I've been, again, sanding it and filling in any sort of little divots and stuff. And then I was going to, as I said, do the top, do the bottom, stick them together, and then, tidy up the edges and glue the rudder on. But in looking at the rudder, that was going to be fiddly to put that on as the last thing, and I was worried about any sort of joins showing up. But then when I really started looking at it, just to see, how it connected, the Mobius part is actually quite thin. It resembles what's on the miniature more than what's on the mock-up. And if you look at the mock-up, it's actually sort of triangular in cross-section, certainly where it meets the cabin, the vertical of the cabin. It's a triangle rather than a straight up and down. And then it's just bulkier in general. So I cut some plastic card shapes and glued those on to fatten it up a bit, put some 2mm strip along the top and around the edges, cut the rudder in half so that the top could be glued to the top hull and the bottom could be glued to the bottom hull, and whatever seam there is there will be hidden by the diving plane when that goes on. But yeah, that sort of just sort of bulking up that tail. Again, it's a little thing, but it just feels more right. It is more right. You can see in the movie it has a top surface, it has sides and a top surface, and the Mobius one is just very rounded, and again it looks a lot more like the 5-foot miniature. But that's sort of up to date for now. So I truly am now final sanding, final painting, glue everything together, and then make the little bars that go in front of the vents. And that's the last piece of fabrication, hopefully, that needs to be done. But like I said before, in every one of these videos, this kit never fails to disappoint. I am working on a way of doing the ring of lights underneath the bubble without lighting it. So I'm going to see how I do that. Got a few things that I'm testing out. Hopefully post another video soon. If you've got any comments or questions, please write in below. And thanks for watching. And